Ladies and gentlemen, the title is true. I have finally started JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. After loving anime for so many years, I started the cult classic. And I have officially finished part 1, Phantom Blood. So I'm here today to review that for you. I'm going over all the characters, my likes, my dislikes. I'm gonna be brutally honest, and my hopes for the future of the series, because I think it could get a lot better, and I hope it does. So with that being said, if you wanna see more reviews like this, I started this with Bleach in the first arc, and I also recently did a review of the new Demon Slayer movie, and I like reviewing stuff, so make sure you subscribe for more anime reviews in the future. With that being said, let's hop in. All right, so my thoughts on JoJo so far, as a previous hater, but not really. Yes, I copied this from the Bleach one, part 1, Phantom Blood. Let's go. Jonathan Joestar. Now, this may be a hot take, I'm not exactly sure, but Jonathan Joestar might be the weakest part about the show so far. Spoiler alert, it may low-key be a good thing that he died in episode 9. I mourned him, don't worry, but hear me out. He is the protagonist of all time. He's likable, but milquetoast. I don't remember which way it was spelled, so I did both. And by milquetoast, I mean he's kind of just like there. Doesn't have a lot of qualities about him that really like just shout out. He's kind of just a guy. He's also kind and honest to a fault, especially in terms of like how forgiving he is of Dio in the very beginning of the show. But the best part of him is the contrast with Dio, which I'll get to when we get to Dio's slide. Jonathan is like as pure and good as it gets, and Dio is about as evil as it gets. So I understand the contrast. They wanted him to literally be a human without a single fault. Just as nice as possible, as forgiving as possible, all that. Which I think inherently made him a little bit bland because he's so predictable in terms of how nice and how good he is. I don't think he's bad, but I definitely think he's like the weakest part of the show so far. And again, he is dead now. And I am aware that like JoJo's is about just like the lineage of Joestars, and I think there's a lot of different JoJos we get to. So I don't know where Jonathan ranks with most people, but I'm hoping that it spikes in terms of just the personality outflowing and I guess just a uniqueness in terms of the character. Next slide. George Joestar. We have Senior Joestar. He's a decent dad, has a weapon of mass destruction hanging on his wall, and he tries to explain his reasoning behind being tough on Jonathan. And it's a part of the show I didn't exactly get. First off, the weapon of mass destruction, that's not exactly his fault. I just think it is funny that all of this stemmed from him just like thinking the mask looked nice as a part of wall decor. But when I say he tried to explain his reasoning behind being tough on Jonathan, when Dio was introduced, he was very, very, very mean to Jonathan, even in front of his father. Like his father saw stuff happening and also noticed how sad Jonathan was getting and how depressed he was with Dio being around. And at the end of his life, George was like, I know it was hard on you. I was just treating you equally so that there was no favoritism. And I was like, okay, yeah. But also sometimes you gotta be an empathetic father and be like, dude, are you good? He was never like, he was always just like, Jonathan, stop being a little pussy. Yeah, I know Dio killed your dog, hits you for no reason, and makes out with your girlfriend, but grow up. So I feel like it tried to make George more relatable in his final moments as he said that, like as he said he wanted to treat them equally, but I found it more just frustrating that he didn't even remotely hear Jonathan out or empathize with this, you know, absolute monster that had now been welcomed into their home. Dio! Best part about part 1. Dio, as I said, is the complete opposite with Jonathan. He is as evil as it gets. Like, I was laughing at how evil he was, because usually villains in shows have some redeeming qualities about them, especially some that have plans where it feels like you can kind of empathize. Like, you know, the whole debate with Thanos being right in Avengers. I think there's a whole subreddit about that. Dio has nothing. He has nothing to be like, oh, yeah, I kind of get it, man. No, he's just pure, unadulterated evil. And I like that. I like how balls to the wall they went with that, because again, it contrasts well with Jonathan, who's as pure and good as it gets. I just think it worked out more in Dio's favor in terms of him being an interesting character. It's like Jonathan took the fall so that Dio could be really cool. The only downside I would say is the last hurrah at the castle in episode 8 was very underwhelming, which we will get to in its own slide. But yeah, I just liked the unpredictability of Dio and how crazy he was. I even said honest about his thoughts on Jojo, which we'll get to as well, but he even admitted whenever he's like wrong or when he did something bad, he's evil and just brutally honest. It's such a bizarre character. I love him. Next slide. We have Danny. Yeah. Moment of silence for Danny. That was absolutely disturbing, and I cannot believe that was in episode 1. I had to take my headphones off whenever I reacted to it on patreon.com/JackTheBus, where you can subscribe for $3, as little as $3 a month, for uncut timer reactions to all of part 1 so far. But Danny also dying furthered Dio's character, and again adds to the point of him being as evil as it possibly gets, which I liked. Didn't like watching a dog burn to death. That was not fun. If you guys know me, animals are my weak point in terms of any kind of media or in real life. Next slide, we have Erina. Erina, I feel very mixed about. She's a decent love interest, and she had the importance of being, you know, the exploitation for Dio. You know, Dio kissed her at the very beginning to steal her first kiss away from Jonathan. But after like episode 3 or 4, it's like she just vanished. And I get that she distanced herself from Jonathan because of all the stuff with Dio. But by episode 9, when Jonathan and Erina are supposed to have their whole future together, it's like I'm supposed to all of a sudden be like, oh yeah, I know all of this about Erina, and I'm glad they're together, and I'm really emotional because they're getting this, like, you know, lifelong adventure together. But in reality, she was just kind of gone for a majority of part 1. So I kind of just wanted more out of just her character, I guess. Cause like standing on the boat at the end, talking about it, I'm like, oh, that's sweet. But like, it would be sweeter if I had seen moments where she like vied to be with him or was thinking about him in the heat of while he was in the heat of battle. But she kind of just vanished. Next up, Speedwagon. Speedwagon's very confusing to me. He was the fastest fanboy of all time. It's like Jonathan did one cool thing and Speedwagon changed his whole personality to be like, I'm Jojo's #1 fan. That is my whole thing now. And I was stuck considering what purpose he served, because he always tagged along, but he didn't really fight. He was like there for moral support a lot of the time. Even when ZEPPELI was introduced, which we'll get to, ZEPPELI was sort of the backup fighter. And then at the, you know, confrontation at the castle in episode 8, I'm pretty sure Speedwagon still just stood there. I mean, no, he fought off a couple of like the zombies, didn't he? Okay, I'll walk back some stuff if he did do that, I think. But still, I just found him a little bit confusing. I liked his like bubbly, you know, positive personality. I was just a little bit lost in terms of why he was doing this. Next up, ZEPPELI. GOAT, W-Fit, Sandwich Connoisseur, W-Mentor, went out in a blaze of glory. ZEPPELI did not waste our time, bro. Introduced in like episode 4, died in like episode 6. Brother speed ran the shonen arc, and he did it in style too. I really liked ZEPPELI. I liked the introduction of Hamon, how it only took 1 episode to explain, it wasn't that confusing, and how it seems like Hamon's very important now. But ZEPPELI just had an aura about himself, man, and like I said, he tagged along, but he was the mentor and tested Jonathan in ways that many mentors would be afraid to. Like in that tunnel, whenever he originally sent Jonathan and let him figure out the entire lesson on his own. He did a really good job. So I would say ZEPPELI is one of the strongest parts about part 1, for sure. Next up, Poco. Okay, I feel like Poco falls under the same category as Speedwagon to a lesser degree. Like I get the town was cursed and everything, but he also kind of just tagged along. And I said it's a kind of a pattern in JoJo's, which I think, like I said, Speedwagon falls under, is like these side characters get introduced, but they're already power crept by JoJo, that like, how could they possibly compare that they're part of the gang. They're kind of like, they're like the guys behind the main villain in like an old cartoon that are like, and that's fine. I just find it funny how it's already a pattern 9 episodes in with several characters. Next, oh, Tarkus and Bruford I wanted to talk about real quick. Yeah, I think this is where the episodes really dipped in terms of like pacing and like the point of intrigue, because they had interesting stories, but it was at this point that Dio was standing like on a rock and he's looking at Jojo, the person he hates the most in the world. And he has the opportunity to just shoot down and start fighting him and try to kill him. But instead, he lets these like 2 minion zombies who he hadn't known that long take care of him. And yet they're legendary warriors. But the Dio I know would have been like, I want his flesh all over my skin. It would have gone right down there. So it really just felt like a reason for Dio to leave and for it to pad out a little bit more. So it kind of took me out of it. And I understand there's like, you have to suspend your beliefs for JoJo's, especially because it's so crazy and hectic and random. But even this felt too random. I also said Bruford was a lot better than Tarkus because Bruford had the interesting backstory, and as he's dying, you get to see his human self. Tarkus was more just like a meathead caveman, which I guess they both can't be relatable, but still. He also took down my goat ZEPPELI. Jack the Ripper. I just found it funny that Jack the Ripper is in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and I think it kicked off this thing with pop culture being involved in JoJo's, because like there's also a character named Tom Petty, which as far as I know is a reference to Tom Petty? I don't know how it's a reference because I don't think he looks like Tom Petty. But I think it's funny that they're willing to use real people, and I think he was in London, like he was in the show. So I would say that's a highlight so far of JoJo's that's even a thing. Next up, we have episode 8. I wanted to talk about. I think episode 8 was actually like a low light. I think it was the least interesting fight between JoJo and Dio through the whole show because it built up this castle that Dio was in, and then the whole fight kind of took place with Dio and JoJo just standing on this ledge while everybody just looked on. And JoJo and Dio didn't like run around or anything. It was more like a slow-mo boxing match, which ended in just Dio falling off. I don't know. To me, episode 8 should have felt a lot more impactful and just crazy and hectic, and I just think it didn't. It also supposedly involved the strongest move in all of anime. I think it was someone on my Patreon that said the move where you have your legs in like a V is canonically like one of the strongest moves. I don't know. Can somebody explain that in the comments? Does that make sense? But yeah, I think I just expected a lot more after Dio, AFK'd in the castle for like 3 episodes, building this army of vampires and stuff, instead of them just, walking in and then Dio and JoJo kind of just fighting a little bit. And then after episode 8, I wanted to also cover episode 9, which I think was the peak of the show so far. I think episode 9 was just a better version of episode 8. I think the emotional beats hit a lot harder than the rest of the show. Again, the stuff with Erina and on the boat, I think would have hit way harder if we got more time with Erina, but it still was like a really nice moment. It felt like finally they had achieved peace. I was not aware part 1 ended here. So on Crunchyroll, the first batch of episodes is like 1 through 26, and I knew JoJo's was in parts, but the episode ended like everybody just dies, and it's like part 1 end, and I'm like, part 1 what? So it threw me for a loop there, but granted, I'm kind of happy it did because again, Jonathan wasn't that interesting, and I feel like it was sort of just rehashing him and Dio fighting over and over again to a fault and wasn't really going anywhere. So it was a very apropos place to end. It just caught me off guard. But the craziness and unpredictability of the fight was what I liked so much, like Dio being in this glass case. And again, I say his appreciation for JoJo. I brought that up earlier. I like how Dio, despite being this insanely evil figure, is like, I respect you so much, I want your body. That's the level I'm going to. There is nobody else's body I would want besides yours, and he can admit that. Like, he's evil, but his ego doesn't even get in the way. He's like, nope, I do not care if it's yours, I'm taking it. You're the strongest person I've ever met. So the fact that he vocalizes that makes me like him even more as a villain, because I think it makes him more intimidating, the fact that he's willing to be honest. And then I said just the reason why I wish Erina had been more involved before is because of like, she's heavily involved in episode 9. So the final verdict, the end. Overall score for JoJo's Part 1 Phantom Blood, I gave a 5.0 out of 10. Whimsy and randomness and lack of care for consequences, I think, is the biggest pro in JoJo so far. The unpredictability is just amazing, and I love it. Jonathan is milquetoast. Again, I'm kind of just bringing up the biggest points and why I gave it the score. The animation was okay. It had some highlights, and it's part 1, so there's a lot of room to grow. ZEPPELI is my GOAT for part 1. Dio was like a close one. Not that I align with him, but in terms of his character, where are the stands? Isn't there a thing in JoJo's called stands where it's like Pokemon or something? Or it's like Persona maybe? Where you like throw them out and they battle or something? I don't know. I thought that was the whole thing. And yeah, guys, that's it for my review of JoJo's Part 1 Phantom Blood. Let me know what you thought of my review. If I missed anything, if there was anything you wanted me to talk on, I can respond to some comments if you'd like. Don't get me wrong, 5 out of 10 is not even a bad score. I enjoyed it. I just think there's a lot more that could have been done better. And I'm really looking forward to how the show evolves in the future, because I think there's a lot of potential, and again, the insane randomness, I already get the appeal of it. I think there's just a lot better ways it could go, especially in terms of, the main character. Guys, that's been it for me. Let me know what you want me to review next in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace!